Hey everyone, Shane at MotoTune Solutions. Today I got a 2003 CBR600RR. I'm going to do an oil change on this today. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we need to do is locate the oil filter. If you look through the front of the bike, you can see right there, that's your oil filter. Okay, some of them have a nut on there. If that nut's usually going to be a 17 millimeter. And then if we look here, right there, that's your drain plug, right there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get our oil pan, and we're going to take the drain plug out, and we're going to take the filter out. On this particular bike, it takes a number 204. Move this out of the way. Okay, on the drain bolt on the bottom, we have a 12 millimeter socket. Really easy to access. Okay, and you want to be careful when you're pulling off this screw because there is a crush washer on it. So, you look, you have the bolt, there's your crush washer right there. I'm also going to replace that crush washer. You should probably do that every oil change. So I'm going to let that go ahead and drain. And while that's draining, I'm going to remove the oil filter. So usually with the oil filters, if they have a nut on them, most of the time they're 17 millimeter. You're probably going to need an extension to get through the headers. And we're just going to loosen this. You know, a lot of times these things are really torqued on there. And a good idea is to loosen it up, let it drain a little bit, get all the oil out of there. Now, we're doing this oil change without pulling off the side panels because on this specific bike, it's really accessible. You don't really have to pull all that stuff off. And anytime you don't have to pull things off, don't do it. So, we're going to go ahead and unscrew the oil filter. And you're going to get some residual oil. Okay, and there's your filter. So when you're replacing the old filter, if it did have a nut on it, it's just so much easier to change these filters when they do have that nut. There's different brands that make these, so you know you might want to get the one with a nut on it so you don't have to use a wrench, filter wrench. So what I'll typically do is this bike has 42,921 miles on it. So what I'll usually do is get a paint pen and write the mileage on the filter itself and the date. Okay, and the reason why I do that is You know, a lot of times you'll forget the last time you did your oil change. A lot of people don't write down the odometer when they do the oil change. So when you do it on the bottom of the filter, you can always just look on there and say, oh yeah, you know, I did it 3,000 miles ago, or I did it in May. So it's always a good idea to do that. So once you pull the oil filter off, if you look inside here, okay, you have the mating surface that the oil filter goes onto. We want to take a rag and just kind of clean that up, go around it. Okay, and, you know, most of these filters come pre-lubed. So this one is pre-lubed. If it's not, just take a little bit of oil, put it on the O-ring. Here's your O-ring right here. That's a 17mm nut. Now, when you're putting this filter back on, you want to make sure you get that thing straight. You don't want to cross thread this, because then you have another huge issue. So, as I say in my other videos, take your time. Once you get it threaded on there, take your extension with your 17mm, twist it on the rest of the way. Oops. Just gonna get it right to the point where it feels a little bit tight. You don't want to torque these down. A lot of people do that. It just makes it so much more difficult to get it off when you're trying to do another oil change. So we're right there, and I'm barely even turning this thing, and then I do maybe a quarter turn after that, and your filter's on. So now that we got the filter on, we're going to put the drain plug back in. Replaced it, we put a brand new crush washer here. Okay, here's your bolt, that's the new crush washer. We're going to slide this pan out. Got a little residual oil going there. And your drain plug's right here on the bottom. It's really accessible. We're going to screw that in by hand. Then we're going to take our socket. And the same with the oil filter. You do not want to torque this down. So with this one, we're right there at about a little more than hand tight, and we're just going to go a quarter turn after that. I'm going to go ahead and fill the oil. What I wanted to show you is this access panel down here, which is the very bottom access panel. You have a bolt here. You have a couple of Phillips bolts underneath. Get under there and show you. Okay. Towards the front there. And you have some in the back. Right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull off this access panel so that we can see the fill window, which is right through that hole right there. It's really hard to see unless you pull off the access panel. I pulled off the access panel here, which is on your right side. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside here. And what we're looking for is your observation window, which is right here. So what that's going to tell us is how much oil is in there. As you can see, it's dry right now. There's no oil in there. So let's put the oil in. Wow, look at that full exhaust system. That's beautiful. You can always tell the full exhaust system with the springs right here. That doesn't come stock. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put the oil in the motor. Right here you have the filler. Pull this cap off right here. You have a little O-ring on here. You want to make sure that that's on there when you screw it back on there. Sometimes it'll stick in here. Now do remember that you have to have your drain plug in and the oil filter in. A lot of times people forget to put the drain plug in and you see oil start shooting out the bottom of the bike. So we're going to pour this oil in, do it nice and slow. Most of these bikes take about 3.5, almost 4 quarts. So as you can see, we have the oil all the way to the top of the window. If you're doing a complete oil change, and that includes a filter, you'd want to fill this all the way to the top just until the air bubble disappears. If you're just doing an oil change and not changing the filter, I would strongly suggest that you don't do that. Here's your marks right here. You want your oil level to be in between those. When we start this bike and let the oil run through the system, it should be right here in the middle. Started the bike. Let it run for a little bit, and as you can see right here, you have a little bit of air bubble there, but you're right at the top of the 2 marks. Anywhere in between here is really good. And when you let the bike run, before you check this, give it about 3 or 4 minutes, because the oil is still coming down from the top of the cylinder head. So right there, that's a perfect level. Button it up, make sure your oil filler is tight. Gonna put the bodywork back on. And that's an oil change on a 2003 CBR600RR. Thanks for watching, everyone.